I've got to go. From my bed, I sit upright, so forcefully that the duvet lifts and crumples at my feet. I've got to do this. Now. I'm not talking to anyone but myself here. In fact, I'm alone at home. I've only been back for a few days. After months away due to a bunch of filming commitments, as well as promotional work and business projects, I should be content with just lying still. I make my way towards the official start of the West Highland Way. There, I stop to take a selfie with the stone obelisk and steel arch that mark this starting point. It's quite a busy street, and though it's impossible for anyone to take a picture of themselves without attracting attention, I try to do so in a low-key way. I turn the lens on bracken and tree trunks and then stop for a few minutes to take pictures of the cows that wander across to greet me. And now, these are Highland cattle, with horns like the handlebars of the bikes in Easy Rider and shaggy salon-greyed hair. All right, lads, I'm moving on. The opening miles of the West Highland Way take me near the Glengoyne distillery. As much as I'd love to pay a visit, I'm on a mission here. According to my activity watch, I've covered just over 15 miles. In the distance, beyond the vanishing point of the path, I glimpse a slither of Loch Lomond. My destination lies another 5 miles from here, low on the eastern shore of this 39-kilometre long body of water. I intend to eat a good supper at Balmaha, a village with several pubs and cafes, and also a campsite on the outskirts. Connick Hill. I glimpsed this wee peak countless times as I advanced on Balmaha. According to the signage, Balmaha lies just 2.5 miles away if I follow the West Highland Way around the hill. Alternatively, I can take a longer path that would lead me to the summit of the hill and then wind back down to the village. It would add more than a mile, but promises incredible views from the summit. Oh, you take the high road and I'll take the low, dee 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 dee, on the bonny, bonny banks of the Lomond. The song lyrics circle around my brain. I just don't know. That almost killed me. That's where I'm going. That was really tough. So, what a day. I'm sitting on the shores of Loch Lomond in my tent. I'm going to have to close my door. It's proper coming down now. Wow, it's proper wet. Yeah, so really had a conundrum because it was almost 4 miles to my destination. I only had maybe 2 hours left to go before it got dark. And I went for it, and it was a beautiful walk. It was really hard. I'm, have run marathons, done triathlons, but that was really tough. One of the toughest I've felt. And then at the top, I was greeted by some beautiful views of Loch Lomond, where the sun suddenly came out, and it was gorgeous. And I got my first sight of, the Highlands. And then arrived in Balmaha eventually, and found a little bar and had some food, and then realised, I needed to find somewhere to pitch. Eventually I had to walk across a field. I found a great spot, wasn't sure if I should do it, but I did it. It took me forever. It was pitch black. I couldn't get my light to work, so I was using my camera phone. But eventually I've got it done. I'm all set up. And then I will crack on tomorrow. It's a pretty easy one tomorrow along the banks of Loch Lomond. Day 2. The wake-up call. My first day was an adventure, and even though it proved far tougher than anticipated, I unzipped the front of my burgundy and blue cocoon with a sense of optimism and excitement. Good morning, I say to the world outside. But yeah, I woke up pretty early, probably around 6:37. and very proud of myself. Made porridge with cinnamon and peanut butter and an AeroPress coffee. So I was pretty delighted with myself after freezing my hand off with the propane.
Less than an hour into the second day of the walk, I lose patience with the rain. I set out feeling quite at peace with the fact that it was likely to pelt down all day. Now the weather gods are delivering on that promise. I feel like shaking one of my sticks at the sky and pleading for them to give me a break. Even with my spirits lifted, I can't ignore the fact that my progress is bordering on pitiful. With the shore of Loch Lomond away to my left, the path takes me up through woodland and down slippery, sloping paths where I have to watch my footing. After 2 hours of walking, I've covered just 5 miles, with 15 more to go before I pitch my tent once more. As I move north, the loch tapers considerably. I keep one eye on the far bank as it appears to close in. Eventually, I'll pass the point where the river Falach feeds into the loch, bringing water down from the highlands. Then I'll know my destination for the night is close at hand. The next section of the pathway proves to be the most challenging of the day. I encounter a lot of drops and climbs as I negotiate the lower slopes of Ben Lomond, the most southerly of the Munro Mountains. I'm also aware that this is the vicinity of the Highland Boundary Fault, a geographical feature and natural barrier that separates the Highlands and the lowlands of Scotland. When I clamber up the last rise to the rock in question, I find there is indeed a pair of eyes observing my huff and puff. Somehow, in the time it has taken me to get there, I find that what looks like a mountain man has claimed my spot. On the inside, I'm boiling over with the injustice of the situation. This guy just appeared out of nowhere to squat on a rock that quite clearly has my name written all over it. I saw it first, I reason with myself. Out here, even between fellow Scots, is that not 9/10 of the law? With yet more rocks to clamber over, streams to negotiate and tracks to slip around, I find that the challenges I consider to be part of the adventure are now becoming tiresome. I know I haven't eaten enough to conquer the soggy shores of Loch Lomond. I'm running on empty, with nothing left to throw in the tank, and a good few hours left before I reach the staging post that will mark the end of a challenging day. In order for me to complete the walk as planned and tick off the West Highland Way in less than a working week, it's vital that I don't fall behind. My destination is Invernon, a small hamlet about 3 kilometres upriver from the loch. On my map, it doesn't look far, and yet it feels like it's taking me forever to cover a few miles. We walk as we talk, or should I say, Graham talks a lot. A really easy, friendly patter that accompanies our waterlogged footfall. He tells me he's getting picked up at the Drover's Inn, which is pretty much the only place for travellers to stay in Invernon that doesn't involve having to pitch a tent. Just then, the prospect of sleeping under canvas for a second night seems deeply unappealing. I'm soaked through and hungry, and I really need to rest. Within a short space of time, I decide that if we make it to the inn for the night, I will book a room. And if they're full, I'll sleep at the stable. I really don't care. This weather has got into my bones. Graham talks as fast as he walks. I'm grateful for both qualities, because it forces me to pick up my pace while being distracted from the endless rain by a good conversation. We stop in front of the Arklet Falls on the north shore of the loch. I've seen plenty of waterfalls today, most of which were quite possibly tricklets until recently, when the heavens opened. This one is well established and also really impressive. It crashes over a series of rocks to the loch below, spitting white water on its final journey from the highlands. We stand on the bridge that crosses it so Graham can take a picture of us both on his camera phone. I only break out of the conversation at one point because I'm convinced I can smell cheese. Do you smell it too? I ask. I'm aware that I'm ravenously hungry, beyond tired and close to hallucinating, but I know I'm not mistaken. It's cheese, Graham. I swear it's in the air, like goat's cheese, perhaps. My friend stops to look around. I watch his nostrils twitch before he grins and then gestures with one of his walking poles. I think these guys may be responsible. Just feet from where we're standing, 3 wild mountain goats observe us from an elevated rocky platform in the hillside. They certainly smell quite funky, in a sort of unpasteurized way, and Graham laughs at where my senses have just taken me. So I'm hungry, I protest, smiling all the same, though I couldn't eat a whole one. Jamie Fraser wouldn't be troubled by a wander through the glens, but here I am, close to hurling myself to the ground like a toddler and refusing to get back up again. My hips ache sharply, my back is never going to forgive me, and my neck is screaming from walking all this way with a loaded rucksack on my shoulders. I thought I was fit, but now I am painfully aware that pumping iron in the gym is a very different discipline to the demands this long trek presents. Flanked by parking spaces and fronted by picnic benches, the Drover's Inn strikes me right then as the most inviting place in the world. The stone walls are bathed in external lighting, while the warm glow through the windows makes it look so welcoming.
It was dark, we were on our head torches and we're still going, and I honestly was so broken. The only reason I kept going was because I was with someone else. We stopped for some jelly babies and I just thought, I'm not going to last this. So my idea was, if I got to the Drover's Inn and if they had a room, I'd sleep it and then see how I felt. Well, got there, they had a room, they checked me in and I could barely speak, literally barely speak. Went for dinner and a pint and a nip, and I wanted another nip but I couldn't. I had to go to bed. So
Day 3. The Great Reboot. I feel great this morning. It's a fresh start, and in sharp contrast to the fact that I've come close to admitting defeat. It was tough, far harder than I had imagined, but all that was behind me now. Can do this. The night before, I had sworn to myself that I'd reached the end of the road. Now, feeling rested and with my sense of purpose restored, I was ready to take on the West Highland Way once more. Emerging into the morning light, I feel reborn, if slightly stiff and sore. It's the day after Halloween, which has roots in Celtic pagan festival that's all about death and new beginnings. Following a restorative sleep in a warm bed at the Drover's Inn, it certainly seems like I'm making a fresh start. My clothes have dried somewhat overnight, slow-baked on a radiator, and I've stood under a hot shower and washed away the dirt, sweat, and tears of the last 2 days. With no sound of traffic from either direction, I leave the pavement and cross a strip of rough ground bordered by a lone stone wall. There, crouching before a sprawling wild rhododendron bush, I shrug off my rucksack and open the drawstrings. I then haul out a bin bag that is straining to contain everything I've stuffed inside. After slogging relentlessly from the outskirts of Glasgow, I have determined what is essential for my journey. Everything else is surplus to requirements. Without my tent, the cooking equipment, my beloved cafe press, the whole bunch of spare clothes, my rucksack feels like it has ended its rebellion. It feels good now, in tune with my body. Later, when I pull out my walking sticks, which will accompany me to the end of the West Highland Way and quite possibly even to my grave, because I love them so much, my pack will seem so light I'll forget it's on my back at all. Back on the West Highland Way on this crisp, dry and refreshing day, I felt liberated. I could wrap what's left in my rucksack into a cloth square, tie that to a stick and just walk with my worldly belongings slung over one shoulder. I could whistle if I wanted, skip a little too. I imagine that if I do, woodland creatures would pop out on the path to accompany me for a while. That's how happy I'm feeling as I head into this third day of my trek, and my first as a Highlands walker in no hurry whatsoever. Ruach. Gaelic for red. It's certainly the word on my mind as I admire the colour that governs this autumnal landscape. There could be all manner of ways to describe the different shades and tones of the heather and the hills and the fallen leaves. I love the Gaelic language because there's passion in the role of that first vowel. Yeah, anyway. Crian Larich is a staging post on my walk that styles itself the gateway to the Highlands, though not in neon lights. That would be a pretty eye-catching signage. The village stands in the shadow of Ben Moor, on the bank of the River Heughan, and the views north are spectacular. The mountain beyond strikes me as a playground for romance and adventure. At the same time, I feel as if I've passed through quite a few places that claim to be this mythical entrance to Scotland's rugged wilderness. As I approach the outlying forest, hiding the village below, I'm drawn from my thoughts by another kind of gateway before me. Rather than the kissing gate variety, I've breezed through many of those in the last few days. This is one of the old-school shepherd ladder style that bridges so many stone walls around here. Crianlarich Crossroads. According to the sign, this is the halfway point on the West Highland Way. It also marks a dramatic change in the landscape. The route will now begin to climb and fall as I tackle the true Highlands. The placard sits in the centre of a fir tree copse. Foresters have been hard at work on the outskirts of Crianlarich. Peeling off the pathway for the village approach, I pass clearings carpeted in sawdust with log piles in the centre, and smell the scent of sap in the air. Surrounding the clearing, lichen-clad trees stand defiantly. Cobwebs glisten in the sun. It feels like each tree has a character of its own. At a promontory, now cleared by the tree-eaters, yet more peaks reveal themselves to me. I recognise Ben Lawyers in the distance, on the north shore of Loch Tay, a large Munro I have still to climb. A lone tree stump, half cut, forgotten by the forestry machines, stands pointing out to the views beyond. Disc-like slices of trunk have been placed on top of the stump to create a kind of spiralling staircase to nowhere. With each step ornamented by white marbled stones, it could be some strange altar to a pagan god. Carefully, I add a smooth stone that I picked up from the shores of Loch Lomond. Is this just a recent act of whimsy created by walkers, I ask myself? Or a tradition, older than the hills? I've booked a room for this evening at the Muthu Ben Doran Hotel. When I made the reservation online over breakfast this morning, it looked big enough for me to be anonymous, which is what I crave right now. The hotel is a few miles north of here, in a place called Tindrum. The village is near the battlefield where the mighty clan MacDougall defeated Robert the Bruce and his army. What is it about mushrooms? Since I set off today at a less insane and more leisurely pace, I've noticed them everywhere. They seem to be gathered in legions under trees and beside boulders. I start to spot different varieties, and though I can't tell one from the other, I begin to think of them as battalions of tiny soldiers, distinguished by their helmets. I don't feel threatened by the wee guys, but the sheer number becomes something I can't ignore. It feels as if the forests have sent them out as a show of force. Oh, yeah! You're welcome to come through here, pal, but nae funny business, understood? The mushrooms, I note, are bristling. All right, big man. On your way, Sam. Mess with nature at your peril. We are all connected. I am surrounded by the Crianlarich Mountains, east of Loch Lomond and south of Strathfillan, with Ben Moor being the highest peak at 1,174 metres. This afternoon, I can confidently say that I am deep in the Scottish wilderness, though Cameron McNeish will disagree with wilderness. My path skirts a broad ribbon of water in what is known as a strath, or river valley, hence the Strath of Fillan. But who's Fillan, I wonder? Who am I? I'm nobody out here, and that's exactly where I want to be. As my path crosses farmland, I pass stone ruins that stop me in my tracks. A small information plaque reveals that this is the site of St. Fillan's Priory, which was endowed by Robert the Bruce. I finish reading the plaque, which tells me that in the 1870s, another graveyard was established on higher ground. I look across at the foothills, struck by the air of peace and solemnity I've found here. Just then, submerged in the landscape, along with the mythology and wonder of its history, I realize I'm doing something I had learned to do on stage. I've lost myself to the moment. Not in character, as me. In the closing miles of the third day, with daylight on my side and time in hand to pause and ponder whatever grabs my attention, I passed the holy pool, separated into two sections, Pool na Bain and Pool nan Fear, the pool of the woman and the pool of the men. Tradition has it that waters are imbued with St. Filian's miraculous powers, which can treat mental illness and other ailments. The fast-moving water slows almost to a standstill here, with fresh fallen leaves dotting the surface. As I take a moment, time stands still, and I can feel the energy of the water washing over me. Lochen is a Scottish term for a little loch. I wouldn't dare describe them as ponds or even lakes. They are what they are. I come across one on my walk just outside the village of Tindrum, though I question if it is big enough to be a lochen. This pool, I feel, has some size issues, though it's the quality of the legend it contains that makes it notable. For this is the Lochen of the Lost Sword, which is said to be the final resting place for Robert the Bruce's legendary weapon. According to the story, this is where he stopped with his men while attempting to evade the English. Keen to pick up the pace to outrun them, he threw his weapon into the Lochen and encouraged all his men to do likewise. I should head into Tindrum and retire to my hotel for the night. Compared to a night under canvas at this time of year, I imagine it will feel like a palace. I'm at the Muthu Ben Doran Hotel. It reminded me very much of The Shining. It's a vast hotel, very big, and there's maybe 3 guests. I got in about 4 o'clock. After walking 14 miles, was a lovely walk, very easy. So I just lay on the bed for an hour. I had a shower, which turned into a bath. Then I heard that the bar was open. So I went upstairs. And it is a vast, vast lounge with all these very low couches. I mean, you could literally hold 150 people. They didn't have any, they only had 1 beer on draft, a bitter, which I'm not really a fan of, but a pint of that and a bag of nuts, and I was happy. As a final humiliation, I realise I've stepped down into something squishy. Sheep shit. It seems, judging by the flock in the middle distance now glaring at me like I should take my boots off in their house. With just 1 field to cross before I reach tarmac, I walk on without making eye contact. The sheep continue to watch me. Like the cows I have passed, these guys also sport formidable horns. I wonder if it's confined to livestock around here, and hope I don't find myself coming face to face with a squirrel or a rabbit that looks like it's in league with the devil. Nice sheep, I say, soothingly, as if this will make a difference. Good sheepies. Tindrum is a small rural village on the southern fringe of Ranach Moor, but the Muthu Ben Doran Hotel is massive. It's a reflection of just how popular the surrounding wilderness has become. I can understand the draw. Being in the heart of the glens is a liberating experience. It's a chance to think and breathe and remind ourselves that the natural world is a precious commodity. Checking into the hotel, I was mindful that, like so many beautiful parts of the world, the Highlands could become a victim of its own success as a tourist attraction. Day 4. The Hard Road. At first light the next morning, well, I would like to say that I am on the path ready to explore the next stage of my journey. In truth, I'm still in bed. It's just so comfortable, and with my new laid-back schedule, I have loads of time. Also, after 3 days of hiking, even at a sedate pace, my body is aching. Normally, I'm driven by a work schedule. But now that I have a rare week to myself, I'm surprised at just how content I am to go with the flow. Another slice of toast? Sure, why not? When I finally check out, I have a port of call in mind that's no more than a mile down the road. Yes, I plan to pop into a service station, but this is no drab roadside franchise. It's a delight for weary travellers that shines out like a beacon. The Green Welly Stop at Tindrum has been in existence for more than 50 years. It's the pride and joy of the village, and popular with bikers. Just a really nice place to take a break from a journey, with home-cooked food, meals on offer, and shelves stocked with quality products from food and drink to outdoor clothing. This sounds like an advert. I'm a particular fan of their whiskey collection, though I've focused on choosing provisions for a decent packed lunch and maybe a little dram. I've just 9 miles to cover today. I'm in no hurry. I cross the road and rely on my sense of direction to rejoin the West Highland Way. I want this to be a relaxed day because I've come to really enjoy the newfound pace of my journey. The signpost for the West Highland Way appears to me like a patient and loyal guide. I've lost count of how many I've passed on my walk, but it's always reassuring to see them. I am on my way to Bridge of Aughey, following the train line to the left. The large Munro, Ben Doraine, stands proud in the valley, its steep cliffs sloping down to Loch Tula in the distance. A small cloud catches its top, but the day is clear and crisp, the sky blue. It will come as no surprise to any visitor to learn that this small highland village is named after the river crossing. The bridge was built by the British Army in the 1700s after the Battle of Culloden. Having defeated Charles Stuart's Jacobites and his bid to regain the throne for his father, the army attempted to bring order to the country by building transport networks across what was considered challenging and often impassable terrain. The waterway crossing that gave its name to Bridge of Aughey also forms part of the West Highland Way. It's a low, stone-walled construction that spans a broad but shallow and fast-moving river. Without any historical context, it's just an old bridge. Knowing it represents a pivotal moment in Scottish history persuades me to just stop and reflect on a feat of engineering we take for granted nowadays. I have come further than planned today. When I set out this morning, I intended to stop in the village for the night. I have a hotel room booked and paid for, but I'm going to press on. I'm not feeling driven to smash through the miles. I'm just really enjoying being on my feet. It's early afternoon, and while I regret my late start now, I've decided I can combine 2 days into one. As long as I don't find the path blocked by dandy mushroom highwaymen, I feel I can extend my day from 9 to 19 miles. Fueled by a solid breakfast and a lucky pair of pants in my rucksack, nothing can stop me. Let's go! The path takes me round the base of Loch Tula and then cross the heart of Rannoch Moor. In bad weather, I imagine this stretch must be wind-blown and arduous. It's completely exposed, but today that's limited to views of backlit clouds as they drift over the mountain ranges. At times, the sun breaks through. Beams of light fan across the moor, as if restoring colour to the gorse and bracken. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. I don't know if that's a tune. The views are panoramic. That's the word I've been searching for as I cross the moor. If I turn full circle, the horizon is defined by forested hills and the copper haze of distant mountain ranges. The muscular peaks of Buchail Etive Moor are the most brooding and romantic. The path will take me around the foothills towards Glencoe, and so I use this commanding landmark as a reference for my progress. Where the path rounds the slope and becomes a little technical, I focus on my boots to be sure of my footing. It's only when I hear movement in the scree just ahead that I look up and find myself face to face with a Highland's famous red deer. Had it been a stag with those intimidating great antlers, I would have backtracked. The females compensate with a penetrating stare. The breed have been so accustomed to tourists, though, that they don't shy away. Just feet away from where I'm standing, this one appears to be assessing me. What have you got, pal? Give us some of your protein bars. Whether or not she's aware of my cowardly form with the cows, I simply can't be bothered to scramble down the slope to circle around her. I'm too far gone in every way, so I just walk on, and she skitters away, empty-handed. I do hope the mushrooms are watching, because this pretender to the throne has just proved himself to be fearless. As the sun sinks towards the horizon, the West Highland Way presents a new challenge. Apart from the occasional scramble or river ford, the track that snakes over Rannoch Moor has been hard packed underfoot. Now I find that it's defined by a stony surface. It feels like rudimentary cobbles with boulders on each side every now and then. It takes me a while before I register that these have been placed with purpose and serve to define the old military road. As with the Bridge of Auchi, the British Army made a lasting mark across the Highlands landscape in the 18th century. With garrison strongholds at strategic points, the roads enabled the redcoats to travel freely and impose order on the people. At the same time, their construction was pitched to the population as a means of improving transport and promoting trade. The Highlanders, who already knew how to move around their homeland, regarded the military roads with disdain. Tonight, I'm staying at the King House Hotel in the Valley of Glencoe. Having consulted the online map when I booked the room, I know that all I need to do is follow the path around the mountain and it will deliver me to the door. I daydream about the hotel, its warm fire, hearty food and soft sheets. A twinkle of lights draws my attention to the ski resort at the mountain's foot. The building houses restaurants and the departure point for the chairlift during ski season. The rugged slopes and walls of rock above look so absolutely stunning. The last time I went up there was with my friend and co-star, Graham McTavish, shooting our pilot material for Men in Kilts. Graham hates heights, and even the chairlift proved to be a challenge for him. It was rather rickety and old, and we went up to the highest point of the ski resort and looked down to the valley below. For now, I have at least another 30 minutes of walking ahead of me. In what could be described as barren, desolate land, which has, however, been a paradise for me today, the distant hotel lights draw me onward. I had come this far having shed all sense of urgency and was just loving every step of the way. Just because the end was within reach, I wasn't going to be tempted into a late surge. As I shrugged off my rucksack and flopped onto the bed to rest before supper, I even felt the first pang of melancholy. For this journey would soon come to an end, though there would be others. The West Highland Way had been a chance to both recharge and reflect at a time when I needed it most. Day 5. Fun guys. I was up early the next morning, with a devil's staircase awaiting me. I didn't want to waste time. Having showered, I dried my feet and made full use of what physio tape I had left. I had no idea what I was doing, but as my ankle felt tender, it seemed like a good idea to strap it up. After dressing for the day, I went through my rucksack in search of anything else I could jettison. There was no way I could say goodbye to my walking sticks. By now, the thought of leaving them behind seemed inconceivable. Instead, I'd win a pair of used socks and a shirt. On this last leg, feeling tired but happy, any reduction in weight was the most valuable thing to me. I even emptied my flask of whiskey down the sink. I can't believe it. What a waste. But every gram counted. This was it. The last push for the summit. I'm in no doubt that the porridge powered me to the top of the devil's staircase. It's also helped that Graham wasn't short of good conversation. We talked about all manner of things as we picked our way up the hillside, from our shared love of motorbikes to the fact that he too noted along the way that the mushrooms seemed somewhat sentient. Buggers were definitely watching me, pal. I sensed that he hadn't advanced to speaking to them as I did, and decided to keep that detail to myself. At the summit, we spent a few minutes in silence, just absorbing the view, then placed a rock on a small cairn to signify our achievement. The glens never failed to impress me, their grandeur and tranquility combining to create something truly unique. The Devil's Staircase does not sound like a pleasant climb. It marks the start of the 5th day of my journey, which will take me to the highest point on the West Highland Way. This section is in fact part of the military road. It's no surprise to learn that the soldiers tasked with constructing it came up with a name. Their hearts must have sunk when they reached the foot of this rise. As it turns out, climbing the Devil's Staircase isn't as challenging as I feared. If anything, I arrive at the top feeling ready for the next stage of the walk. Why? Well, for once, since I set out on this journey, I've fueled up on Scotland's breakfast of champions, a proper bowl of porridge. Secondly, I'm now feeling walking fit. The last days have really prepped my legs and my body has adapted. Walking for more than 7 hours a day feels like the new norm, a natural way of life. I'm eager for each step, Plus, if I dared to mutter or moan on this early ascent, I'd be taken to task by the hairy figure following in my footsteps. Having made it to the top of the Devil's Staircase, our next waypoint on the journey sits just a couple miles to the north. With a gentle descent all the way, we can see the village of Kinlochleven. It sits at the easternmost point of Loch Leven, which is a finger of silvered water against a backdrop of rolling hills and mountain ridges. The walking is easy here, though Graham is quite clearly starting to struggle. He's developed a limp, I notice, which seems to be from a reluctance to place too much weight on the leg that's troubling him. I don't want to ask, but when I catch his eye, I see a hint of resignation there. He's come so close to completing his journey. I reckon we've covered well over 80 miles, so I understand how crushed he must be feeling. But I am determined to crack on. This is the final leg, and I am happy to take it on alone. Before Graham retired from the walk, he was concerned that the climb out of Kinlochleven would be challenging. He's not wrong. The path follows the contours and proves quite steep in places, but if anything, it comes as a relief from yesterday's long-distance hike across the moor. It feels like a workout. In the gym, I often focus on my quads. They're certainly put to the test here as I dig in one foot after the other. I build up quite a sweat, but knowing the end is within reach drives me onwards. I reckon it'll take me the best part of the day to reach Fort William. As ever, I just want to be sure that I complete the walk before darkness falls. It feels so good to be walking again. Nothing but the sound of my own footsteps for company, the regular rhythm and sway of the road, the scenery slowly changing. With just a few miles ahead of me, I find myself reflecting on how far I've come. In this short time, I've changed in so many ways. The climb out of Kinlochleven is spectacular. As I gain elevation, the mountains and even the sea reveal themselves in the distance. From the hills, I look back at the village on the shore of the loch and realise how picturesque it is. There's some moisture in the air, but I wouldn't call it rain. Pressing on, I feel proud of the fact that I've walked all this way from Glasgow. I pause for a moment at one of the many streams that cross the landscape. My feet are aching somewhat, but then I remind myself that in recent days they've transported me across nearly 100 miles of countryside. Of course they're going to be sore. Now that I've stopped, I notice just how many great boulders are scattered around this valley. In centuries gone by, they would have rolled down from the ridges and then fallen still in time. In our fast-moving world, there's something so grounding about being here. I take a deep breath. It's all good. Dangerous building, keep out. Naturally, I went in. Inside the old bones of the place, I find an open hearth and a window frame with a peculiar view of the hillside rather than the full range of the valley. I wonder if the owner positioned it this way, so he or she didn't feel overwhelmed by the vast open space. Then again, maybe they just wanted a heads up in case the enemy staged a surprise attack and came marauding down the slope. I drop my rucksack from my shoulders, pick out some loose raisins from my pocket and just stare through the frame for a while. Curiously, as I gaze outside, I feel a pang of homesickness. I haven't lived in my new place for long, but it's dawning on me how much I love it there. This week, following a path for miles on end, I feel a renewed appreciation for just being still. I know things will be hectic when I return, but in due course, I look forward to putting down roots for the first time in my adult life. The path takes me down to a river, and then follows dutifully along the clear running water. Far ahead, beyond the hills, I see the ghostly traces of mountain ranges. My thoughts turn to the one peak I intend to conquer to complete this journey. Ben Nevis stands just to the east of the West Highland Way. But if I can reach the path's end in Fort William today, I intend to devote tomorrow morning to climbing to what is the highest point in the land. It's the first time in days I realize that I've let my thoughts venture ahead. All I've really done is make a rough plan, but when my attention returns to my surroundings, it strikes me that means my journey is almost over. It comes as a jolt. I don't want it to end. but nor do I want it to weigh heavily on my shoulders. So, given that I'm completely alone, I throw my arms wide in celebration. Scotland! I yell, simply because I want to hear my own voice across this great glen. Hello? The voice comes out of nowhere, but at a horribly close range. Is everything okay? With a gasp, I twist around to see the hiker who was on her phone when I passed her. She looks concerned. All fine? I blink, and then realize her attention has turned to the screen of my phone in my hand. Presented with the evidence of a snap of my grinning face, I can't deny that I've just been attempting a mushroom selfie. They're pretty special, she says, as if to make me feel less awkward, while also taking a precautionary step away from me. I've taken loads of photos. Sheepishly, I rise to my feet. The woman is in her 20s, I think. She's rocking a knotted yellow headband and an expression of quiet amusement that suggests that if I wasn't a total stranger, she'd be ripping the piss out of me. I'm Sam, I say. Lucy. At the top of the next hill, arriving at a bend in the path with a clear line of sight between the trees, I stop and stand in awe. As if to prepare for my first unrestricted view of Ben Nevis, the clouds have cleared from the glen. All the mountains around it are impressive, but this one stands out like a ghost giant. It's massive. A behemoth. A kingdom in its own right. I can't be sure if it's snow or sunlight that blankets the slopes of the southwest face. I'm so in awe, it's difficult to process the sheer enormity of this great throne of rock. Nor can I wait for tomorrow when I will attempt to reach the top. I'm excited and intimidated and move on with my heart thumping. Traversing another ridge, I cross the floor of the valley at pace and then storm up the switchbacks in the path on the other side. I can sense it now. As the light begins to turn golden and then wane, I'm confident that I will reach Fort William before nightfall. According to my map, I don't have far to go. Since I first set eyes on the mighty mountain peak, Ben Nevis strikes me as being at the very heart of this highland wilderness. Even though Fort William lies just a few miles north of here, on the shore of Loch Eel, I can't stop looking across at the immense knuckles that dominate the skyline. Shadows might be lengthening across my path, but that summit will remain bathed in light until the sun sinks behind the horizon. I'm so looking forward to setting out tomorrow for the roof of this world. While I prepare to reach the end of the walk I've come to love, it's comforting to know that a new chapter awaits me at first light. For me, this journey has removed the noise and demands of everyday life to remind me that we're all just passing from one waypoint to the next. What matters is that we can look back at each stage, knowing we made the most of it. No sooner have I started imagining the beer with a whiskey chaser than my attention turns to a sight that will add at least another hour to my journey. Think of a better place from which to appreciate this wonderful world within a world. I find a path that zigzags towards my destination, all uphill. It's so steep I'm on my hands and knees at times. I can hear water tumbling from nearby, and estimate I'm about to add at least 100 meters of elevation to my trek. The effort just makes me all the more determined to get there, and when I finally make it, I do so at a crawl. At the top, I stop on all fours for a moment to get my breath back. Then I rise and turn to the light. This is it, I say to myself in wonder at the rough-hewn tapestry of glens, lochs, and mountains. The only movement I can see is in the subtle wash of light through the clouds and the graceful twists in the mist gathered at the seat of Ben Nevis. This is why I'm here. I'm silenced. My breathing slows. I'm welcomed into the landscape. The mountain consumes me. My descent from the watchtower is mostly done on my arse, using my hands and heels as a brake. Once I'm back on the path, I brush myself down and break into a jog again. I only drop back to walking pace on joining the road that takes me the last few 100 meters to the end of the West Highland Way. It's the old finish, according to a box of text on the last panel of my map. Apparently there's a statue in town that makes more of an occasion for those pilgrims who've come all the way from Glasgow, but this one is good enough for me. Day 6. Waypoints. I sleep like a king. It helps that I lucked out on checking into my hotel in Fort William. Spoiled for choice when it comes to rooms, a surprise benefit of doing this walk out of season, I find myself with a 4-poster bed for the night, perhaps like Jamie's in Lallybroch, and a majestic view across the rooftops to the hills beyond. Before setting out from home, I would have been appalled at myself for not camping under the stars from start to finish. On unlocking the door from my room, with the reality of almost 100 miles under my belt, I found a new appreciation for comfort that I would have previously taken for granted. This morning, I have a mountain to climb, the highest, literally. With the West Highland Way behind me and lasting memories of every step of the way, I intend to complete my week by trekking to the summit of the Great Ben Nevis. I'm dressed for the climb in suitable boots, several layers under a waterproof jacket, and of course, my snood. I also have my walking poles strapped to my back. Oh, I couldn't possibly leave them behind now. I imagine if I dared to climb a mountain without my good luck charms, I'd probably return this afternoon by rescue helicopter. Physically, I'm tired, but I can wait to catch up on sleep. Before the sun goes down, I plan to catch a train directly back to Mulgai, where my adventure began, and hopefully my car is still there. I'm looking forward to dozing as the landscape I have trekked across rewinds through the window. This trek has been transformative. I set out to walk the West Highland Way on the spur of the moment. Purely in a bid to fill a gap in my schedule, I set my sights on racing across Scotland's great outdoors in record time. Now, having reached the end of one adventure and about to embark on another, I feel like a different person. This time in the wild has opened my eyes to so many things, from where it all started for me in life, to the direction and pace in which I intend to continue. The most immediate revelation is that I've learned to truly appreciate the moment. I have dressed with great respect for the mountain. In my research for the Everest film, I've learned that conditions can change without warning. I don't want to be one of those tourists who heads off in sandals and a t-shirt never to be seen again. Within half an hour, however, I've stopped to remove a layer and continue with my coat unzipped. It might be in November, but I'm sweating. I couldn't ask for more glorious sunshine. It really is a treat. A breeze drops in to greet me as I ascend into the morning. It strengthens on occasion, which just serves to make me all the more aware of my footing. The path steepens in places, and my hike becomes a clamber and a scramble, but I push on. I think I must have reached a low-lying halo of cloud because a thin, swirling mist forms for a few minutes. I zip up my jacket, and then a short while later, stop to add a layer underneath. The temperature starts to drop quite noticeably, and so I pull up my snood from around my neck to cover my mouth and nose. In this time to myself, once I'd learned to enjoy the walk with no pressure to see what was over the next hill, I've come to find a new appreciation of the world around me. It doesn't take much for me to realize that perhaps I should apply the same approach to relationships. I'm also mindful that I am the son of a man who disappeared. Having committed to setting down roots and starting a family, my dad chose to leave us, and the last thing I want to do is follow in his footsteps. I wonder if there's a record for the number of bad selfies a hiker has taken on this climb to the summit of Ben Nevis. I reckon I would be a contender. I'm just so mesmerized by how far I've climbed. I am now quite clearly higher than the surrounding peaks. If I peer down, I can see hikers so far below they could be ants, while the great rivers flowing through the glens look like silk threads. Honestly, the only way to get some perspective on such a scene is by sticking my face into the foreground. I'm into the clag at last. I hate that word. It sounds sort of sticky and thick, which I guess it is. From the moment I arrive, the temperature tumbles. I pull my jacket hood up over the crown of my faithful baseball cap and press on. Having seen not a soul for some time, all of a sudden I find that the path ahead is dotted with hikers on their way down. Most strikingly, Despite the fog, I can see the summit at last. Everything else is shrouded, but for this dome of rock with the sun behind it, this is it, I think to myself. This is the end as much as a new beginning. Clambering up into this cloud world, I find my internal voice falling quiet. All the wanderings that carried me this far make way for a sudden well of emotion. For the first time on this journey, I find myself close to tears. I guess I'm just sad it's all over. What I need, I decide, is a hug. The cold really does take me by surprise. Having worked up a sweat on such a long climb, I can literally feel it begin to freeze on the surface of my skin. I'll be fine for a short while, though, so I press on up the path as it winds towards the highest point. I focus on the skyline, just meters away where the path seemingly vanishes into the blue, and with one final push, I reach for the summit. Here, the sun reveals itself to me in full. What's more, for all the people making their way down, I find there's nobody around. I stand at the highest point in the UK, all alone, but alive and well, and it's glorious. I'm exhausted. My muscles ache, and my bad Achilles is threatening to mutiny, but above all, I'm elated. What a feeling! What a journey! From the lowlands of Scotland to the magic of the Highlands, and now the top of Ben Nevis. It might be one more waypoint, but ultimately, this adventure has charted a map to the heart of who I really am. Epilogue. As soon as I arrived back at my house, having descended Ben Nevis to catch a train back to reality, I found my life waiting for me. For the first time in a week, I checked my emails and voicemail. Rather than stay up for hours working through the backlog, I took my time and felt all the better for it. Nothing changed in my world while I was away, but my place in it feels more grounded now. Just being at home feels good, in fact. Before my long walk, I was restless, bored. Even though I had a rare week to myself, I couldn't settle. Quite literally, since my return, I've savoured the stillness. My house also strikes me as a place I could settle in for a long time to come. A family home, perhaps, whatever that might mean. Of course, my week in the wild wasn't one long idyll. The first 2 days were a lesson in humility for me. I was over-ambitious and overladen. In the pouring rain, that combination could have crushed my soul had it not been for the kindness and companionship of a fellow traveller. I still feel sad that injury prevented Graham from completing the West Highland Way, but I know he'll be back. Usually, the best way to find the yellow brick road of your life is to start out on the dusty dirt one. And then let yourself become so preoccupied in making the best of it, having fun and challenging yourself, that you actually stop paying attention to the path. Notes from the universe. New perspectives from an old friend, Mike Dooley.